and welcome back to the Tea and Soju C-Drama podcast, your safe spot for C-Drama chatter. I'm your host, Liliana, and it's time to sit back, grab your tea, and let's chat Asian dramas. In today's episode, we are taking a little detour from C-Dramaland into K-Dramaland, and we're going to be reviewing the K-Drama Daily Dose of Sunshine. Just some housekeeping before we get into the episode. If you like the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe on the platform you listen on. That really helps the podcast reach other listeners. For more content, check out Patreon, where you can find behind the scenes, first impressions, movie reviews, and more. Finally, if you'd like to chat to me or find a community, check out Discord, Instagram, and other socials. The link is in the episode notes. So, I have brought on a guest today to do this review with me. So, Mina, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, Liliana. Thanks for having me. I'm Mina. I'm the host of the podcast Kpop Bookshelf. That's a podcast where we explore Korean popular culture through books. And just a little about myself. I am a big K-drama fan. I haven't gotten into the C-drama space yet as much, but I got into K-drama with everyone's gateway drug of K-drama, Boys Over Flowers.
Oh
So,
goodness, like you're an like that's an OG, isn't it?
right. And it was actually through my Japanese classes I was taking, but I'm no
hmm
longer a Japanese language learner, where some of my friends were K-drama fans there. And so I got into Boys Over Flowers somewhat, but also was like, this is ridiculous.
Yes.
Um, now the types of dramas I tend to enjoy the most, would be the ones that are a little more, I guess, somber. Like my favorite is my Ajashi.
hmm
The It's Okay to Not Be Okay, although that is a little tainted now. Or actually my Ajashi
Yes.
too, because there's like so much that
Yes, I
happened.
feel like that's so sad because I loved It's Okay to Not Be Okay, but now I don't think I could rewatch it with like a clear mind. And it's such a shame because the rest of the cast, I mean, him too, unfortunately, but the rest of the cast put in a stellar performance. And it's just sad that you can't really, I don't think I could separate the art from the artist on this case.
Yeah, I've been trying to rewatch it just because to see if I could actually, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to not think of the circumstances while watching.
Mm.
So haven't
Mm-hmm.
gotten very far in
Yeah.
rewatch. Yeah. Right now, actually, or one of the recent things I've watched isn't Asian drama, but I may as well say it here since you're in the UK, is Adolescence, which
Oh my
is
goodness, yes.
really interesting and really thought-provoking. So that one I watched like twice back to back. So I was like, whoa.
hmm
So yeah.
I just pressed play on it, and I've only watched like the first 10 minutes because it's bank holiday. Like over Easter we get in the UK, you get Friday bank holiday and Monday, so we get like a 4-day weekend. So I'm my plan is to binge the rest of it because it's only I think like 4 episodes. It's
Right.
it's fairly short. But I definitely want to watch the rest of it. It's been so highly talked about by so many people, and it's quite interesting because although I live in the UK, I'm originally from Portugal, and what tends to hit in the UK, like show wise, doesn't necessarily become as popular, back home in Portugal. But this, like, I've seen so many people back home just talking about this show as well. So it's definitely one of those that I'll want to check out. So yeah. So what else have you been watching anything else currently, or is that it for the time
Honestly,
being?
like, yeah, I don't know if it's like the stress of like the state of the world or something, but like it's
Mm,
been really hard to focus on K-dramas or anything, honestly. And I was
anything?
actually kind
Yeah.
of grateful for Adolescence being only 4 episodes, like you said, because it was
Mm-hmm.
something I was able and it was engaging enough that I like
Mm-hmm.
could watch it. But yeah, it's been a huge struggle. I'm trying to get back into it. I want to watch some of the much older K-dramas, including some of the
Mm-hmm.
ones that um what is his name from It's Okay to Not Be Okay. The name is now escaping me, though his name is everywhere. Soohyun.
Oh yeah,
His
yeah.
yeah, some of his old stuff, Kim Soo-hyun's old dramas, just because they were so critically acclaimed, and I'm hoping that'll kind of get the spark back in me being able to pay attention to this and go back into some form of escapism since everything sucks. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always I get that sometimes when it just in that phase of I can't be dealing with any of it. Like nothing's really working for me. For me, I think I tend to right now as well, like shows are just not doing it for me. I don't know what it is. They're just not grabbing me right now. Um I'm watching a couple of things, but only because I have to watch them for podcast reviews and stuff like that. But I have been in I've just been like in bookland for a little bit. I've just come off reading the Throne of Glass series. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like a mega fantasy series. And so now I feel like I don't know what to do. You know, when you've got like the biggest hangover, that's where I'm at right now, I think. So yeah,
Yeah,
but I totally get, when you just don't, you're not really gravitating towards anything. I think it just happens to all of us sometimes. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I'm trying to get into like arts and crafts for a bit, and then I'll get back
Mm,
into both books and dramas. I can't. My focus is gone. So
it's gone. Yeah, yeah. Arts and crafts. I've been getting into building these. Have you heard of like book nooks that you put on your shelves?
no.
So basically, it's like these, I don't even know how to explain them, but it's basically like these boxes, right? And they're all made of wood and stuff, and it all comes like pre-cut, but you have to build it all yourself. And it takes quite a bit of concentration. So you build them all, and then when they're finished, it's like a little window, and inside is like a scene of like an alleyway or a street or a
Oh,
library or
that sounds
something like
cool.
that. It's really good. And like once you're building them, it's so entertaining to do. And there's even ones where you have lights running through them and they put the instructions for you to like do all the lights and like some of the wiring. So it takes quite a bit of like concentration, but it focuses you so much. So that's because I'm not very talented when it comes to like arts and crafts
Oh,
in
me neither.
general. So, so this is something that I'm like, I can do, like I can follow instructions. I'm so yeah, that's what has been keeping my focus a little bit as well.
Nice.
So for people to get to know you a little bit, what kind of shows are like you if you had to pick some of your favorite shows of all time that you've watched, what would those be?
I just to put a little background to it before I say it, it's like I really liked all the like lovey-dovey K-dramas for a while until they all just
Mm-hmm.
got so formulaic that I kind of was really turned off by it. I was like, okay, she's gonna be a poor person who has a kind of nice
Mm-hmm.
aspirational job and she'll fall in love with the chaebol like douchebag CEO. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I can't I can't do this anymore. It's like the same thing. But as far as like all-time favorite shows, and maybe this is why I started appreciating more kind of the like called it somber dramas. I don't know, there's probably a better way to say it, but like I also like Signal, the some of the crime
Mm-hmm.
types of stuff. But The Wire, I really love The Wire. And
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously not K-drama and it's an older series. And like I really liked Succession, and so I really liked shows like what was the one the Park Ju Song Joong-ki was in it. The name is totally
Oh,
escaping me. You know what I'm talking
oh
about?
my
Where like
goodness. Yes,
yeah,
I know what it is, but I can't remember the name.
because I
Oh
keep
my,
thinking the Korean translation was like son of the chaebol, like youngest son of the chaebol. It's literally like called something, but okay,
I'm
so
gonna Google it right
okay,
now and
yeah.
see if I
So
can find it.
okay, yes, please
Mm.
do. Song Joong-ki, and where he's like kind of is born again. It's sort of fantastical in the sense that he's a regular person working for a chaebol company, and then he gets born into and goes back in time to be the youngest heir of a chaebol company, and he goes through history, but he already knows it because he was like 30 or 40 or something when it happens, maybe like 30-ish years old when it happens, and then he
Mhm.
like says things like invest in the movie Titanic and like, oh, something
Yeah.
big's gonna happen on 9/11 2001. So
Is it Reborn
yes,
Rich?
Reborn
Yes.
Rich. We got there. We got there.
We did. We got there.
Yeah. So they reminded me a lot of Succession. And so
Hmm.
those kinds of shows I find really fascinating, even though some of the people are a bit despicable and things like that. But yeah, I like those kinds of shows.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same. I think so. When I first started watching dramas, I think all of us go through this phase where everything's so new, right? And everything's so great to watch because it feels fresh because you've never watched anything like it before. But then once you start watching a few back to back, and once you get a couple of years or whatever it may be under your belt and a good few dramas, I do agree everything does start to feel a little bit samey, and I think it makes it harder for us to enjoy, you know, more dramas, I think. So I totally agree with that, with what you're saying there, I think. So yeah. So let's get into this review. I'm going to run through the Asian Wiki synopsis for Daily Dose of Sunshine. Jung Da-eun works as a nurse. She is transferred to the neuropsychiatry from the internal medicine department. This is her first time working in neuropsychiatry, so everything is difficult and awkward for her. Nevertheless, Jung Da-eun tries her best to deal with the patients, and she grows as a nurse with the help of chief nurse Song Hae-jin. Dong Gu-un works as a doctor and specializes in proctology. Watching nurse Jong Da-woon and her pure ways, Dong Gu-un realizes that he smiles when seeing her and is even healed by her. Meanwhile, Jong Da-woon is friends with Song Yu-chon. He looks like a very bright person, but he holds pain inside that nobody knows about. So this is 12 episodes long and they're about an hour 10, which I thank the heavens because I said this when I first watched this drama. I can't deal with the 1 hour and a half, 1 hour and
Yeah.
45 movie length episodes anymore. Um, so this aired all the way back in on November 3rd, 2023. It's a Netflix show, so they airdropped, all 12 episodes on November 3rd. This is directed by EJQ, and he's done things such as All of Us Are Dead, season 1 and season 2, The King Two Hearts, Beethoven Virus, Fashion 70s, and Damo the Legendary Policewoman. Have you watched any of these, Mina?
Yeah, I watched All of Us Are Dead, and I really
Mm.
liked it, even though I'm not a big on the zombies aspect of things, but I watched that
This
one.
one, this one's on my list to watch because a lot of people say it's really good, and I'm not a fan of zombies either. If they're done like, I really enjoyed Happiness and Kingdom and stuff like that. So I think I'll be okay with All of Us Are Dead. I think it's definitely what I want to try. This was the first thing I kind of watched from this director. I think. Now for screenwriters, we have two screenwriters. One is Yeon Q, and he's done things such as Heavenly Ever After, which is upcoming. I think in 2025. Behind Your Touch from 2023. The Light in Your Eyes from 2019, Listen to Love from 2016, Smile from 2006, and Old Miss Diary from 2004. So have you watched any of these?
Oh, the light in your eyes sounds super familiar. I don't think I ever actually watched it. Maybe I just heard it about it through like social
I
media and stuff.
think The Light in Your Eyes is the one with, oh my God, it's escaping my brain right now. Oh my goodness, that's annoying because I can see the image of the actor I'm thinking about, and I can't seem. I'm googling it now. The Light in Your Eyes. Oh, it's one with Nam Joo Hyuk that he does.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he does strong, not strong, or
Yeah,
weightlifting
weightlifting
fairy book.
fairy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think I watched Behind Your Touch from 2023, and that's it from this one, from this screenwriter. And then the other screenwriter is Kim Da-hee, and they've only got Behind Your Touch on their list plus Daily Dose of Sunshine. So that's the only two. Now for cast, we have an extensive cast on this one, but I'm just going to focus on what Asian Wiki and MDL describe as the main cast, which would be obviously we have Park Bo Young, who is our female lead of this show. She is long been a favorite of mine. She's been acting since 2006, and she's done things such as King and I from 2007, Stars Lovers from 2008, Oh My Ghost from 2015. Where I first met her, this was my very first Korean drama ever, and that's Strong Girl Bong Soon from 2017. We have Doom at Your Surface from 2021, and we have most recently Light Shop in 2024 and Mellow Movie in 2025. So, what have you watched from her? Like, what is your experience with Park Bo Young?
Well, Oh My Ghost has been on my list for 100,000 years. I never have gotten to it, but Strong Girl Do Bong Soon is definitely where I know her from the most. So
Mm. Funnily
iconic.
enough, I have actually watched Oh My Ghost. I have watched Strong Girl. I've watched Doom at Your Service. I've watched Light Shop, and I've watched Mellow Movie. I've gone through
Right.
a lot of her dramas. Yeah, she's just one of those actresses that I think she tends to pick stuff that is different. And I enjoy that in actresses. She doesn't just go for the straight up, like we were talking about, like lovey dovey kind of shows. So I overall tend to enjoy her performance. And for example, even in a show like Doom at Your Service, where I don't think the script was that good, she still was really good at it. So
She's
I think
so
that's
talented.
always yeah, yeah. So then we have Yeon Woo Jin, and he's been in things such as a virtuous business from 2024, Nothing Uncovered from 2024, I Want to Hear Your Song from 2019, Queen for 7 Days from 2017, My Shy Boss from 2017, Marriage Not Dating from 2014, Secret Love from 2014, and Aurang and the Magistrate from 2012. I think I've seen him. The first thing I think I saw him in was Marriage Not Dating, which is an slightly older drama. What about you, Mina?
I don't know, because I thought he looked so familiar for
Hmm.
many episodes, and I finally did like look it up, and I couldn't figure out. I don't think I've seen any of those dramas. So I don't know why he looked so familiar or seemed even familiar,
Hmm.
because I don't think in the end I have seen anything else that he's been in.
Maybe you've just seen like some posters or something, and then like
Right.
his face is stuck in your, because that happens to me like that sometimes. I'm thinking I must have seen this actor somewhere, and then I look it up and I'm like, I haven't. Like, I don't think I've watched anything they've been in. Why are they seeming so familiar to me? So that does happen. And then the other main actor is Jang Dong Yoon, and he's been in things such as like Flowers in the Sand, Oasis from 2023, Search from 2020, The Tale of Noctu from 2019, Mr. Sunshine from 2018, School 2017 from 2017, and then we have Solomon's Perjury from 2016. I think the first thing I saw him in, I think, was A Tale of Noctu. I think that's where I kind of saw him first time round. What about you, Mina?
For me, it was Mr. Sunshine, but I don't even remember now, like what his character was or who it was, what he
Maybe
did.
it must be like a I don't know. I don't know if it's a main role or if it's
I think
necessarily
it
like
was
a
there was like a younger soldier that like they were sort of or like a younger kid or something hanging around. I think he
Mhm.
might have been that guy. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Mr. Sunshine is on my list to watch. I know a lot of people recommend it, and I definitely want to get to it for sure.
You should.
Yeah. That's the general consensus, is that people say, I you really do need to watch it. And I think nowadays, I didn't used to enjoy like historicals all that much, but nowadays I tend to lean way more into the historicals than the modern dramas. So maybe it's time to kind of put that one to, and watch that one. So this show actually won a couple of awards, and one of them being the Blue Dragon Series Awards from 2024. It won Best Drama, as well as Park Bo Young took Best Actress for the role. And then in 2023, it also took the Sign 21 Awards series category Actress of the Year. And again, Park Bo Young took the role. Now, I definitely think she deserved those awards because she did a brilliant job in this role. It's not, I find it looks on the surface, I think when you first kind of see her role, it seems fairly easy. But I think as the show goes on, and especially in the later half of the show, you definitely see why, why she deserves all of those awards, I think.
Totally agree.
So let's just do some general non-spoiler thoughts. So overall, what were your thoughts about this drama, Mina?
Okay, well, to be kind of honest, I feel like it was so good, but like some places fell a little bit short of something
Hmm.
that it could have been. Like there was some like unmet potential somewhere. Maybe it's just my own opinion. And I do think it was trying to do a lot, and maybe that was one of the reasons, and that it didn't quite get there. But I do also think what it did do, what it did achieve was quite important because there's a lot of empathy in this drama, so which is not really a spoiler. But
No.
and I think that's really I think that's really needed both in Korea for the subject matter at hand and also just in general everywhere for everything. So,
Mm. No, I agree. I think so it's very interesting because I watched recently, and by recently I think it might have been last year. Or was it this year? At some point, I watched It's Okay, That's Love to review with Jess from Daybark. And I really liked that drama. And obviously, there is a disorder, an aspect of mental health disorder in that drama as well. And actually, we brought this drama up because I said to Jess, I feel like this is like where they started, where they just kind of started touching on mental health and, started including that in dramas. And now in 2023, we have this drama where they lean completely into the whole plot is mental health and mental health disorders. So I feel like I agree with you. They did try to do a bit too much. Like they tried to focus on too many things, which sometimes could get, because what the format of the show is basically they do almost like a case per episode until about episode 8, where they switch gears and then you have one kind of running plot for the rest of the drama. So I think because we're trying to delve into too many directions, it may appear a bit confusing sometimes. Overall, like I said, I really liked it. I think the performances that we put in were really good. And even though some of the people, the patients were only in an episode because their case was an episode, I still think they were able to manage to make the audience ourselves empathize with the characters and kind of see their story and see them as people rather than as patients. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it, that they tried to show that side of a disorder. So yeah. So that's kind of like general thoughts. Like I said, I like the acting. I feel like this
oh,
can
I
get
was going to add one more thing. So sorry to interrupt. So
no,
I
no,
just
go for it,
thought of
go
it.
for it.
It reminded some when you saying that about like kind of humanizing or maybe I'm saying it the wrong way, but anyway, like yeah, humanizing mental illness or having this empathy reminded me a little bit of because it could have gone the way of Attorney Woo, which featured a person on the
Mm-hmm.
autism disorder spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
That one elicited a lot of reactions from people who either are on the spectrum themselves or care for people who are, and some people didn't like some of the things that were used to portray the autism, and some people, I don't know, it was like a lot of mixed reviews from
Mm-hmm.
how it was
Mm-hmm.
portrayed. And I felt like this show, like you said, in some really short moments or like short time span, they were able to do, I mean, I don't have, or like experience necessarily these specific disorders that were going on here. So I can't speak for all of the authenticity behind it, but I thought
Mm-hmm.
it did a pretty good job, a pretty good stab at it for a fictional, TV drama. So
Yeah, I will say I do enjoy the way they try to visually show the audience some of these disorders. I don't think it's necessarily a big spoiler because it's something. So one of the characters has panic disorder, and they show them almost as if they're like they can't catch their breath and they feel like they're drowning almost. And I feel like because to us who don't have those disorders and don't have the experience with those disorders, we're not going to know what it feels like to go through an episode or to battle that specific disorder every day. So it was very interesting that they don't just say, oh, that patient has panic disorder, or and you don't just see the person kind of like going through a panic attack. They show you, you know, like that, like like he's drowning, and they show you him in a body of water, if that makes sense. So I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah, because they had those kind of board meetings with the medical staff, or they're just
Mhm.
clinically going through the definition. The clinical definition of XYZ disorder is this, which is helpful. But then for like the layman or someone who doesn't necessarily know all the clinical terminology or what that actually means or how does it manifest in some people, to show a person literally engulfed in waves of water
Mhm.
is so
Mhm.
much more impactful to understand if you are not familiar with that typical or that particular rather disorder. It really did a great job, like you said, in portraying it in a way that was like at least somewhat understandable.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of my favorite things about the show, actually, is the fact that although I've no experience. Like I don't know if they've portrayed it well or not because I don't have any connection or any experience with, these disorders. But I could understand what the patients, well, understand as much as somebody who doesn't have connection with those disorders. I could understand to a certain degree what they were experiencing because it was being shown to me and not just being described to me. So I definitely really appreciated that. So yeah, let's rate this and then we can sort of jump into spoilers because I feel like we can talk a bit more freely then. So for ratings, we do one teacup. It was something I watched. It wasn't good, but something made me finish, and that was a 1 to a 5.5 on MDL. Two teacups, the okay ones. Dramas I don't really recommend, but they are an okay background watch, and that's a 6 to a 7 on MDL. Three teacups, the enjoyable ones. Good dramas. They were enjoyable, and I would recommend to people who enjoyed this genre, and that's a 7.5 to an 8 on MDL. Four teacups, the loved ones. These are dramas that I really loved. There might be a couple of problems with it, but overall, a really enjoyable drama that I would recommend to a wider audience, and that's an 8.5 to a 9.5 on MDL. And then five teacups, the rose glass no faults dramas. This rating is reserved for those dramas that you love so much that you are willing to ignore any problems they may have. And that's like your 10 on MDL. So for me personally, this holds because I forgot to mention this is a rewatch for me. So this holds on a rewatch, and I would rate it a 40 cups. I would recommend it to various people with the caveat that this gets heavy. I mean, it is a show about mental health. It's going to get heavy. So that's not going to be for everybody, I don't think, because if you have a connection with that particular disorder, or, if you are just not into dealing with this sort of stuff, and then it might not be a drama for you. But for me, it worked. It was fairly emotional. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the performances. So yeah, that's my rating. What about you, Mina?
For me, and I think it would change on rewatch, but for me, probably a 3.5 teacup if I can do half a
Mm-hmm.
teacup.
Yeah, we do.
Because
We do halves here too. We work with those two.
Great. So yeah, because I felt a little bit like some of the issues for me was because they were trying to do so much, there were some people I sort of got lost for me, like their character development got
Mm-hmm.
lost, or I was like, what is the point of this person? Like, what are we
Mm-hmm.
doing with this person, or where's the resolution and something? I felt like some of it was like bothering me as I was watching it, and I couldn't let go of it. And then even when I finished, I was like, but wait, what about this or that? And so potentially if I rewatched it, maybe it would kind of sort itself out a little better in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
or I could like let go of some of that a little more. So for me, 3.5.
That that is fine. So that is your ratings and all of that out of the way. So we are now going to be jumping into spoilers. So if you haven't watched this drama and if you don't like spoilers, this is your chance to go watch it and then come and listen to the rest of it later. If you have watched it, then listen on. And if you haven't watched it but enjoy spoilers, listen on anyways. So this has been your spoiler warning. So I think we can start by, in general, just talking about characters. And I think an obvious place to start would be to talk about Park Bo Young's character and like her journey and trajectory. As Jong Daeun. So for me personally, I did not see coming, and this is going to we're going straight into the deep end because I did not see coming that she was going to get depression in the later half of the drama
Yeah.
because I don't know, it was a little bit unexpected for me, especially where it rooted from, because so she gets fairly close to one of her patients, and one of her patients tragically takes his own life through suicide after being discharged, and that kind of sends her into there's a part where she's in denial and she doesn't even remember, like it's crazy to think that she wouldn't remember that he's passed, but they do explain that in some cases your brain just kind of blocks that because it's kind of like a traumatic event. But I did not see coming that she was going to get depression in the later half. What did you think about like that, Mina, like that story?
It threw me so bad. I was like, what is
Mm,
happening? And at first, I almost wanted to reject it. I was like, I don't like this. What is this? This seems almost
mm-hmm,
like a gimmick. But then, as that particular part of the storyline progressed, it sort of started to make sense. Because if you thought back to the first half of the show, where she's very chipper, she's like a go-getter, she's a people pleaser, she's all these things. She wants to be good at her job. That's kind of like her whole thing. And you start to see where like you could see how it could happen, where all
mm-hmm,
this chipperness and everything was a facade to some extent, and are kind of crumbling for her somewhat all along, maybe even before the show time point starts for us viewers. Like there's stuff that has happened with her losing her position in the internal medicine department and things
mm-hmm.
like that. So you could see where she was in the denial thing also made sense in after you thought about it, because I agree. At first you're like, how did she like forget that he died, or
Yeah.
like, but it does kind of, because she's so like determined to be like, I'm good at this, I can do this, I got this,
Mm-hmm,
this is fine,
mm-hmm,
everything's fine. And so it starts to make sense as like her depression unfortunately kind of evolves a little more, where you're like, okay, so I can see how she got to this place, because she's been in denial almost this whole time on some level.
mm-hmm.
And when faced with these little pockets where, in moments like in the cafeteria where she runs into some of her old internal medicine colleagues, she's so uncomfortable and so awkward. But then she goes right back to like chipper mode as soon as she can, that you're like, okay, she's just been kind of pressing all this stuff down that has come up for her. And denial is like the only other place she can go until she just can't go anywhere. And she kind of mentally falls apart, understandably. So that's how
Yeah,
I
I
took
agree. I feel like she sweeps a lot of things under the rug and like I'll deal with that later. Like it doesn't exist. Like I'll sweep it under the rug and like the rug only keeps getting higher and higher and I feel like she eventually gets crushed under everything that she's kind of swept under the rug along the show. And I feel like I think it's in episode 1, even when we first meet her character, it feels like she's suffering with a little bit of insomnia. Like she seems like she's not sleeping very well.
listening
So
to that podcast or whatever
yeah,
thing.
yeah, for sleep. So I feel like she's already having a little something there, but I just thought she might, because like obviously she even says it's the first death that she's experienced in terms of, that was the patient that she got very very close to, and I feel like Dawoon is a very, I don't know, she has a lot of empathy for her, her patients. And that's one of the reasons actually that they kind of kicked her out of, well, I can't remember what was her first. Was it general? Was she
It
in?
was just like general med, internal
Yeah.
medicine. Just, yeah.
So they kick her out of there because she's almost too careful with her patients. She's very caring and she takes a bit longer to do things. so you can see where that kind of slowly starts to, build. And like you said, I don't think she is very chirpy, like constantly chirpy. And I'm like, there is no way somebody can be that chirpy 24. Like it just there's no way. Like something's bound to break because I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit of more of a I don't know, negative person. But I don't think anybody can be that chirpy 24/7, surely.
I think this was such a good thing for a drama to show because we do have our fair share of chirpy, chipper, happy-go-lucky characters,
Hmm.
and they usually like stay that way for the most part, even if things kind of go haywire, they get back there. But to show like a full-on breakdown of all of that is so rare in like any drama anywhere, I feel like so I thought it was smart in a way to, even though I was so
Hmm.
thrown off, it was like, what am I even watching now? This is a whole different show. It was
Hmm.
smart to do because it was really different and something that's in a way more realistic, probably. Because you
I
probably just would
agree.
break down completely.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she was put through a lot. But also, I thought it was very interesting that nobody around her kind of realized. And it's very interesting. There's this addition, this like added layer of the fact that she can hide her symptoms because she knows what they're going to be looking for. So, in her mind, and even she's in denial for a lot of it. She's like, I'm not sick. I'm a psychiatry nurse. I would know if I had depression. And it's just like, and even everyone around her takes a good while to realize that there's something wrong with her. They just think, oh, she's just a little bit, sad. She lost her patient. She's just a little bit sad. So I think that added a very interesting layer because even when she gets admitted into the ward, she keeps saying, I'm not sick, I'm a nurse. Like, why would you admit me?
Yeah, and her not taking her meds during the time
Hmm.
that she's in the ward is it was wild. But I have done a lot of reading because in like 20, I don't know when, 16, 17 maybe, there's like a big push for mental health awareness to the point where maybe some people experience mental health awareness fatigue, which is another reason why I
Hmm.
think it's interesting that these shows are coming about, especially in places like Korea, where mental health illness or mental health and mental health wellness is like a big talking point because I think what this show did was show, I mean, going back to even what you were saying about the portrayal of the manifestations of certain, for some people, because not even every mental illness manifests the same way in every person who has that or is
Hmm.
diagnosed with that.
Hmm.
But to go back to her and stuff like that, it's like it it was showing like just being an empath, masking, because that's something I've read. I don't have like anything that I know of that would entail like masking of symptoms. And that's something
Hmm.
they talk about, like, or like high functioning depression, high functioning, anything, masking your autism symptoms if that's what you have. She was really masking, I feel. I mean, I'm no mental health expert, but just reading all this stuff, which I've been doing, like I said, since like almost 10 years
Hmm.
ago.
Hmm.
She's been masking so much and so hard that she even masked to herself. And it's
Yeah.
like denial is one thing, but this is like another level, I would say, almost
Hmm.
of that. And that's why like people around her sort of was like, okay, you're fine. And they say that about like people with high functioning various situations like and people who can mask really well, that people around them also don't know. They're really suffering in silence. And so I think it was kind of in a way brilliant to portray, she thinks she's an expert, but she like herself doesn't even know to what extent she's
Yeah.
ill.
Yeah, I agree. I just thought it was so well done. And like I said, so very unexpected. I didn't think that was where the show was going to go, but I liked it that they took it there. Because even towards the end, not towards the end of the show, but so when she comes back to the hospital, there's a line that I actually really appreciate. She comes back to the hospital from being in a psychiatry ward to treat her depression, and she comes back, and some of the caregiver, some of the guardians discover that she was sick, and they don't want her looking after their sick you know, daughters, sons, brothers, whatever it may be. And she has to go to this meeting, and the head nurse goes with her. And, you know, they're all saying, why would, you know, sick person treat the sick and whatnot? And the head nurse kind of says a line along the lines of, you know, mental, it can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. You know, it could happen to anyone. And what she says is, why, you know, would you want your sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, whatever it may be, to not join society again? Like, they have to. So how would you feel if what you're saying was thrown at your family members? And I really, really appreciated that whole scene and that quote of her saying, it can literally happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime, even you. And it's true. Like, mental health disorders can happen to anyone, even the happiest of persons, like Dawoon, can get depression. So I feel like they connected that very, very well, I thought.
That was a classic moment. I also felt the showing of her going from working, functioning, etc., like high functioning adult to being inpatient in a psychiatric ward, and then slowly coming to terms with it, the recovery process being going from I'm gonna fake swallow my medicine to like actually I'll take my medicine and realize like
Mm-hmm.
coming to that real self-realization of like, oh my God, I am sick, I've been sick, I need to get treated, I need to get better, and recovering was such a good thing to show because whether Korea or not, there's a lot of people who kind of play down mental health illness and some people's severity with it, and they think like, well, just get over it, or like just
Yeah.
like do whatever. And to show that no, you can be almost incapacitated, which she is at that point, to recovery and rejoining society. It's important to show that for everyone, the characters, like you were saying, the people who are in, because she works in more of an outpatient, I guess, setting, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe not everybody is as severe as she becomes. And so to show like, okay, some people just need like regular treatment for a while and then they'll be fine, or be on long-term medication and then they just still go on their lives, to showing someone who becomes somewhat almost debilitated by her condition, then recovering from it and still trying, still dealing with it, doesn't disappear. But she can rejoin society, can go back to her old job and her functionality for the most part. I think that was a really important thing to show, that something that other
Mm-hmm.
shows don't really show.
I really appreciated the fact that they don't say you're cured, or they don't say you're done now, if that makes sense. Because I think a lot of shows, when they used mental health, they would be like, well, you're in love now and whatnot, you're cured, you're fine. And I really, really appreciate the fact that throughout this whole journey, throughout the whole 12 episodes, they never say you're cured. They say it's a daily battle. Like, you get up and you choose to, you know, with the meds helping you and with a good support system, you choose to have a better day. And sometimes that's not going to happen. Sometimes you're going to have a step back. And I really appreciated that they show that recovery isn't linear. Like, it's not a you start sick and you end up cured. That's not what it is. Like, some days you're going to be okay and some days you're not. And I really, really appreciated that. And I think they show that with Yu Chan, which is Dawoon's best friend, because he has panic disorder. And so he starts off the show, and actually nobody knows that he has this panic disorder. And it's made him quit his job where he was an office worker, and now he's just like working for his parents' chicken restaurant. And he's well educated. Like, he could be doing an office job or something else. And I think what they show for him and his growth is that he starts off, you know, quitting his job, not even being able to be in an office setting, and kind of like crumbling under all the pressure with his panic disorder. And he's the one who's like, they show him in underneath water, he can't breathe. And then towards the end, when he takes the step and he takes his medicine, you know, and he decides to try going back to that office, they show him having a panic attack. They show it, but he now has ways to cope with it. And they show the same thing with the nurse. Do you remember the nurse that has also panic disorder? And they show that, like,
Right.
by the end, he then comes back. So I feel like that was a really, really good point for this show. It's the fact that it's not linear. Some days are going to be good, some days are going to be bad, but they encourage you being followed by somebody and you being treated, which I think is so important. But they also show that the patient has to be willing to do that treatment. It has to come from the patient, I think.
Yeah, and also it shows like the affected person, the patient, the whoever's diagnosed, will have like you just said, the setback, or like when the water's starting to rise up again when he's back at work, and then he's like, having to deal with that. Like it doesn't ever maybe really totally go away, but on some level you still have to kind of try to live your life as best as you can. I wanted
Hmm.
to touch quickly on something you mentioned where they often show in dramas like, well, now you're in love and you're cured. And I think like you really hit something that I wanted to somehow talk about, but couldn't figure out how to express even until you said that,
Hmm.
because so many dramas do show like the way to solve any problem you may be having, and not only mental illness, is to just fall in love and end up with the person you fall in love with. Because
No.
one thing I have a soapbox on that is really just between me and my friends is like they don't show unrequited love well enough. I mean, they kind of do with like Yu-chan, but there's always like second lead, syndrome or whatever, second
Hmm.
lead thing.
Hmm.
And then, but more than that, I wish they showed a lot more about things like where you can't get to that person, or you can't, that's not the cure. It's like whatever is ailing you. And it felt like this show was gonna go in that direction with Goyeon and Yu-chan, but then like she's like, I can't date. She's like, I can't do this.
I loved
She's
it.
like,
Loved it.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, it really showed where she like took like ownership of she like I need to take care of myself first, the whole put my oxygen mask on first and then I can deal with
Hmm.
other stuff on the plane analogy. And so for her to like kind of like she doesn't ever like for a long time say anything really as far as an answer goes to Go-yeon, who's confessed to her. Yu-chan, I think she knows, like has feelings, so she's like, I can't. It's one of her denial things where she's like, I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah.
You know, so for her, when she finally is like, I cannot with you right now, and this show could have easily been like, well, she'll just Go-yeon's a physician, he understands on some level what she's dealing with, and he's well versed in psychology or psychiatry, and it could have easily been like, well, as long as she's with him, like he'll be one of her support systems. And it's like, no, she's her own support system for like a
Yeah.
while. Like she's
Hmm.
got the support
Hmm.
of medication and therapy and whatever, but like she's her own support. She has to go through a lot of
Hmm.
it alone. That was
Hmm.
brilliant, I thought, to show.
I completely agree. I love the fact that she doesn't get into a relationship until she is happy in herself. And, she's like, I need to do this by myself because sometimes it's going to happen where I'm not going to have anybody around and I need to be able to do this myself. So I love the fact that she's like, I don't need a man. I don't need anything. I need to focus on me right now and my recovery. And that's what's important. So I agree. I loved it. Like you said, I just get mad when people just like, oh, love is a cure all. It isn't. It isn't. Because even love sometimes is hard work. So, I just think it's really important that for her, they showed her journey being she herself wanted to do the work and she had her psychologist and and the medicine, and that started to help once the medicine started working and she actually started taking it. That you could slowly see her almost come back to life in a sense. And it was such, I mean, I think Park Bo Young just did a beautiful job because it feels almost like two characters that she had to play, where she's very chirpy, she's very happy go lucky in the first kind of six episodes ish, because then episode seven, I believe, is when her patient dies. And then in the later half, the scenes where there's a specific scene where she's trying to get out of bed and she gets out of bed and she's like trying to walk to do something, and it's like the floor just swallows her up and she just goes back to bed. And I feel like that's the perfect showing of what's happening to her. And even her best friend goes to see one of the doctors, and the doctor is like, don't force them to go outside, don't force them to do anything, because people with depression, sometimes they barely have the energy to eat, they barely have the energy to do anything. And I thought he explained it so well. And then like that physical visual of her just like drowning into the floor, sinking into the floor. but she got herself out of that hole like by the end. And she said, I'm not going to be cured. And I think actually she says a line to that panic disorder um nurse, and she says, and he asks, am I not going to be able to be a nurse? And she's saying to him, no, you're not going to be able to be a nurse. You're not going to be able to do that. You have to be a nurse with panic disorder. And I really, really appreciated that line, because it's like, you can't just be a nurse. You're going to have to learn to be a nurse with panic disorder. And I really appreciated that emphasis, you know, on that, I think.
Yeah, somewhat related is I think another thing that was really good about her character is she's such an empath for
Mm,
and that was like you mentioned earlier is like what got her out of her other department and forced her into this department because that's kind of like the no one wants this department. And it
yeah.
almost is to her detriment how empathetic she is, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see it out playing out. But they don't, in the end, they don't villainize her empathy. They don't, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, you can still be you. Like recovery, I think sometimes like again, like so last stuff I've read and seen, like people are like, okay, I have to change this thing about myself in order to recover. And she kind of
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. She does get treatment, she gets support. She has to do a lot of uncomfortable things that are out of her comfort zone, like what the journaling
Mm-hmm.
and stuff that she was like, why am I doing this? Like, this is dumb. And I think for a lot of people, that is like the things you have to do and explore if you are committed to a recovery of anything. It could be like alcoholism or something, probably too.
Mm-hmm.
But like, they show her stepping out of her comfort zone and trying to make changes, but she doesn't ever stop being her super empathetic self. Her kind of work family really supports that. Her
Mm-hmm.
boyfriend, whatever, best friend, they support, they understand, they accept it. And that's so helpful to see. That's like you don't have to change your whole personality or way you are to recover, to be a healthy, mentally healthy person, which is what I think some people think of when they think of like recovery. It's like a transformation from being who
Mm-hmm.
you were. It's no, you're still you, but you
Yeah.
have a more recovered version, healthier version of you. And you don't have to let go of like your essence to do that. And
Mm.
showing that and finding a way to show that was, I don't know, they wrote it very well, I would say, and acted
Yeah,
it very
I agree. I definitely agree. Just going back a little bit to that analogy that you made about putting your own mask first. There's one of the episodes that one of the patients comes in, and she's kind of losing her memory, and she's dedicated all of her life to her daughter. Like, she breathes and lives for her daughter. There's a couple of situations, but this one's like a little bit more in, and you get to, this is the episode where you get to see the second in command. I would say she's the second in command, Park So Yoon. She's the nurse. So there's like the head nurse. I feel like she's the one right below the head nurse with the glasses. And she is also struggling with like her balance between her kids and her career. And she empathizes with this patient that comes in. And one of the things that she says is that, how can you make, like, you're so concentrated on like your kids' happiness, how can you make anyone else happy around you when you yourself are not happy? And it's like that whole analogy that you were saying about, you really have to put on your own mask before helping anybody else, because if you're going to run out of air and pass out, you're going to be no good to anybody. And I feel like that's one of the things that they kind of focus throughout the whole show with various patients, is that, and even with Dawoon, like the psychologist says to her, you have to be a little bit selfish. Say no, like say no. And she learns to say no. And I really appreciated that, because I think for people who are people pleasers, it's really hard to say no, just in general. And I feel like for her to be like, no, yeah, somebody asks her, and it's the smallest thing. Somebody asks her, oh, can I have that spot? Because I really like that spot. And she says, no, actually, I really like this spot. So I'd like to keep it. And it's like the smallest thing that a lot of people wouldn't think is a big step, but for her, it is. And I just loved it. I loved her character in general. I think like her story trajectory was done so well. It was written well, and it was acted so well as well. Because although we have lots of different people and characters, her story is really the backbone of the show. And I feel like it gave the show a really good backbone in essence.
for sure. I agree.
Mm. So, I think I was thinking about any other things that I wanted to talk about. Um, Off the top of your head, if you can remember, which one was like your favorite kind of case that came into the ward? Like the one that kind of, caught your attention the most, do you think?
Well, you know what I liked was some of the more subtle ones, only because when
Hmm.
you think of mental health and a mental ward, you're already thinking psychosis, delusion, hallucination, just like complete, utter spiraling out. But
Hmm.
the ones that were kind of in a way more subtle, like there was the very wealthy patient who had everything in life, but was like, so,
Mm.
it was like killing her how much she started acting out in the like being kind of promiscuous and being just acting out of pocket. And everyone's like, why are you doing
Hmm.
all this? And her mom, it was because her mom sort of projected this life on her that she didn't, and she was like, I don't know how to even decide what to eat for lunch by myself or whatever along those lines she said, because her mom like basically told her, you're rich, you're gonna go to this school, you're gonna,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of people do live like these prescribed lives or they're told to live one, and to rebel from that is so difficult. And so on some level, people see a patient like that and they're like, you're fine. What's your big deal? What's the big deal? Like, why are you being like this? It's
Mm.
just like it looks like a personality flaw or something they're willingly being petulant because she was like what, almost 40, and she's like, I don't know
Yeah.
myself. And then
Hmm.
the confrontation with her mom. And then also to go back to something you said with Suyeon, the nurse, the second in charge nurse, who is grappling with just work-life balance mainly. Like that was, I think, important for me to see because they do go into her inner life and they show her apartment with her husband and her kids because she almost doesn't, I mean, again, I can't diagnose or undiagnose people, but it's like she doesn't really have a mental illness per se. She just has these certain struggles that she's like grappling with.
Hmm.
And to show like how even she has something she can take from some of the ways they've developed in psychiatry or psychology to cope or to manage yourself and like perspectives that you could shift to try and manage your life better. That also I think were two of the things I liked a lot, were like these more subtle, not so dramatic, like I'm incapacitated, I'm suicidal, and all these things. Um, that is like what is expected. So it's important to show those, but then these are the things that are less shown and
Hmm.
less talked about.
I think for me, I agree. I really like those subtle ones, but the one that really hit me was Mr. Kim. So basically, Dawoon's patient who passed away. And I think it's because you think, I don't know, you want to think, oh, he's been discharged. So, he's on a fairly good path, but then they show you that's not the case. And they show you, that he decides to take his own life. So that case really, really impacted me, I think, in the whole show directly, and the case directly afterwards, because the case directly afterwards is a man who is suffering with PTSD because he had a very happy life. He had a wife. They just had a baby. Unfortunately, the baby passed away, and then the wife takes her life through suicide, and he is suffering from PTSD from, the wife like basically losing his whole world in a matter of very, very close. And I just, because putting those stories right next to each other, and whereas one just kind of went the very, very sad way of the patient taking his own life, whereas the second one, he started taking his medicine and they kind of, you know, dealt with it in the way that he said goodbye to his wife. They went through this whole exercise where he said goodbye to his wife and he said what he needed to. And he kind of gets to walk and he seems to be getting better, not cured, because like I said, I don't like using that word when it comes to mental health in general, because I don't think you're ever going to be cured. I think you're going to be your disorder is going to be managed or controlled, but not cured necessarily. So I those two situations really, really, I think it hit me because it was so impactful having them back to back with such different outcomes, because honestly both of them were having the same treatment, and not the same treatment, but you know what I mean, they were being treated by the same people, and yet like it could go such different ways, and it shows it's different illnesses, it's different people. So yeah, I think those two really, really hit me.
I'm glad you mentioned those characters because I think the way mental illness manifests sometimes with men, because of the kind of
Mm-hmm.
masculinity concepts of you got to be stoic and you got to be whatever. You had this one man who had his sort of niche special interest. He was a kind of like a fantasy geek, and he like kept seeing himself as like a almost superhero, but in like a Dungeons and Dragons maybe kind of way. And
Mm-hmm.
his like special interest, like people could write him off as like, oh, what a, like, I don't know, anime nerd or whatever kind of thing you want to say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
replaced with whatever niche interest. And then you had this guy who just was doing the like the prescribed life thing kind of in a way. He had a wife, he had a kid, and then his everything that unexpected happened, and he was grappling with grief. Like I thought that was really interesting because you don't get to see men be vulnerable, or like it's like, frowned upon, I guess, for men to even be vulnerable in some instances. And so this exploration of, because especially when you juxtapose it with Suyeon and her working mom, work-life balancing, again, somewhat, I keep saying expected, but I don't mean to downplay any of these, things. Like all of that
Mm-hmm.
is important. But it's something that we can like, it resonates because like, yeah, I've seen this played out before where someone's dealing with work-life balance or whatever. But then this and working mom stuff and expectations on them to have like a perfect child, that's like brilliant. And then you have these men who are like quietly and in totally different ways, like someone who is a little quirky, maybe isn't one to go along with society's everything, because I think he has trouble in university and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
because he's so lost in his fantasy world and on some level, along with whatever else he had going on. And then you have this other guy who's just like, quote unquote regular. And then this one event, or it's two events actually, unfortunately, because you said he lost his child, then he loses his wife,
Mm-hmm.
spiraling out. And yeah, the way they allowed room for his grief and letting him know that that's what you're dealing with is grief, and this is you, it's okay to be dealing with that, and you have to deal with that fully to like start to get better, to like have this like mock funeral moment, because she just left him, on her own accord without him knowing she was going to do that. So he really was like so taken off guard, to have a this moment where like, okay, let's give you a chance to say. And obviously it's not his wife who he's speaking to, and it's not a funeral, and he knows all that, but
Mm-hmm.
like it hit in a way that I think was really different. And to have this space for male vulnerability is important, and the manifestation of mental illness for some men is important, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree because I think sometimes men, I don't know, not in general, and I think it's changing, but women are more open to talking, especially because I mean, we have this whole thing. We talk to, our girlfriends and whatnot, and we vent whenever we need to. We put our emotions out there, and I feel like that's a good thing because then you don't stew in your, in whatever you have going on in your head. I think men historically haven't done that. They kind of stow in it and like, like you said, they have to be very stoic and they have to be, I don't know, they almost seem to not want to show any outward emotion or anything like that. I'm glad that's a thing that's slowly changing, but I think and I'm glad that men are feeling more comfortable to kind of seek therapy if they need to, or, just talking in general. And this show absolutely hit the nail with they showed an even amount of patience, I think, for the most part, of women and men. Like it can happen to either, it can happen to anyone. And I think they did a very good job at showing that, throughout the whole thing. I mean, talking about characters in general, for me, Dawoon is my favorite. Like, she's my favorite character in this. But I think, secondly, I loved the head nurse. I just think she's such a good character in general. And she's also one of those characters where you think, how does she do it? She has her whole life together completely. And then you kind of discover that her sister has schizophrenia in like the last couple of, and she's dealing with the fact that, and I think I Googled this, but she says, that schizophrenia patients are almost treated like criminals in, what's the word? Criminals in the making. And she says that. And she's dealing with like all of that bias. And it shows that like there's a whole different side to her, and it shows why she's so good at her job. It's because she's been taking care of her sister for a very long time, and I just loved the fact that she doesn't let anybody come in and take advantage of her nurses. She's so caring to all of them. And she still, like, she doesn't let the doctors get away with anything, because that was an interesting relationship to see as well, like doctors not versus nurses, because in theory doctors and nurses should like work just so well together, but there is a very important part in this show where they sometimes show that the doctors weren't respecting the nurses as they should, and I actually appreciated that by the end that kind of had changed a bit. So yeah, I love the head nurse. What were your thoughts on her, or any other character that you thought, really caught your attention?
Yeah, speaking of stoicism, right? Like she is super stoic in a lot of instances that
Yeah.
we see, and we get to see her vulnerability so late in the game, as it were, and rarely in a way. But yeah, it shows she's also very empathetic, even though hers comes across a different way than Down's. I also really loved Manchon, the lead guy, I guess you could say, the guy who's
Hmm.
always like restraining the patients who need restraining.
Yeah.
But to go
Oh
back,
yes, I
yeah,
love
so
him.
yeah, and to go back to Hyojin, it was a few things that I noticed. So my family background is they're from Bangladesh, although I was born
Hmm.
in the United States, and that's where I am, and where we all are now. But
Hmm.
in these, and there's a lot of parallels I found in between like Korean cultural like touch points and Bangladeshi ones, and maybe all of Asia, if one
Hmm.
were to really generalize. And of course, other cultures have it too, where it's like this familial responsibility to take care of whoever. Like, I mean, because I think in some cultures it's like, well, that's your parents' problem or your sister's problem or someone else's problem. But there is a big emphasis on looking after each other, or like even sometimes cohabitation, things like that. Like is living with her sister, and think they show that a little bit. And so I really appreciated that aspect of it, because like sometimes I think, because a lot of dramas and just society in general, they're like, why are you not married, and why do you not have this, and da da da, and like that's the end all be all, and that's why everyone's chasing love, and
Hmm.
that's why love is the cure
Hmm.
to all your problems. They never show at the end of the drama, what if you ever get divorced, what if someone passes
Yeah.
away, how do you cope with that, right? Or what if you guys just break up, whatever. So I like that they don't really like go into like, no one's asking her like, why are you not married or whatever, but you kind
Mm.
of find out. It's because her responsibilities lie with her sister, and that's how she prioritized her life, and that's why she lives the way she lives. And I think it's important to show those other things too, that everything in romance, love, marriage, whatever, is not the end all be all, or even having kids and all that stuff. And so I noticed that about her. And then I think she was like a really good spokesperson. And of course, we see later, as you mentioned, when the guardians of other patients on the ward get all up in arms about Down and her illness that she is recently recovering from. She can speak to that experience of being a caretaker, of being someone who
Hmm.
is responsible for someone who has fairly severe mental health problems or issues, and trying to grapple with that, and the stress of being a caretaker of someone who is in that position. It's good that they show that. And she was the one who's able to stick up or down because of that, and say to the
Hmm.
parents and guardians, like, hey, like, okay, so should we just like lock your patients away then too, like if that's how you feel?
Yeah.
And she points out, like, don't you think someone who's been through all this could best treat people who are going through this, because they know what it's like. And then briefly to talk on about Manchun, I don't know if I missed it or something, because there was some moments where I was like so confused and like Googling, like, well, who is this person and what is going on, that maybe I missed some parts of it. But his the way he's interacting with this, because you may, especially in some aspects of Korean, Neo-Confucius culture, he could be
Hmm.
like, he's not like the doctors where there some of them are little have their arrogant moments or whatever, their ego kicks in. He's very like fine. He's like working with a bunch of women and women nurses. He's like both like somewhat chivalrous in almost a way, because he's like, oh, someone is acting up. I'll let me go in and like, tackle them
Yeah.
literally. But then like he's almost just like he's aware, like he knows Hyojin's story, like who's the lead nurse. He knows the vulnerabilities that's there, and so this like very quiet, almost unspoken. He's seeing it all, but he's like, you kind of almost don't see him much, except for he needs to literally jump in and do something. So
Hmm.
I kind of wondered more about his backstory, which, like I said, I might have just fully missed in my other endeavors trying to Google this show. But yeah, I liked his character a lot too.
No, you didn't miss it. This is one of the things that I actually wish they would have explained a little bit more. It was about his character specifically, because we do get to know that he's been at that ward specifically for 30 years. And there's he says a line that to everybody that every all roads lead to Mr. Moo, to Mr. Yoon. So, if or any of them have a problem or if any of them need anything, he's the go-to guy because he's been there for so long. Like there's a specific scene that Dawoon just needs like a very quick nap and he like goes and shows her this room where the nurses have been conjuring and it's hidden away. Nobody can, like, kind of everybody knows that the room is there, but he kind of guides nurses into this little room that's hidden away so they can get like 5 minutes of peace away if they need to. And I just really liked his character. I do feel like he was sometimes used almost like as a plot device to just kind of, when somebody, like you said, when somebody needed restraining or when the nurses kind of needed somebody, he was there. But I do wish there was a bit more on his background. Saying that, I wish there was a little less. I wasn't as keen. One of the storylines, actually, this is one of the downsides for me. One of the storylines that I wasn't as keen on is one of the nurses, Min Do-ri, with like her mother and all of the debts and like her getting into a relationship with a doctor. Like, I just didn't see the point of it with the show as a whole. I don't think it necessarily added anything apart from I think they were trying to show that she went into nursing because she could do it and she could get money and she needed to pay these debts. And then when it came to, she had the bravery to quit it and go chase something else. But it's just like, really? Cruises out of nowhere? It just felt a bit random
What do you
to
mean?
me.
Is that not the natural career?
I mean,
Like going from nursing to cruise dancer, whatever she's
I
doing.
know. It's just like, where did you even find that I don't know. It was just a bit odd for me. And it felt like, I don't know. It's one of those, it's only just like a small niggly thing. I just personally didn't think it necessarily added anything to the story as a whole. So yeah.
No, I'm so with you because like I really even from the beginning I was like she's kind of not friends with all of them. She's not like disliked or she's just sort of not on the same wavelength as some of them because and you
Mm-hmm.
find out later she's like obsessed with her dead and stuff as she should be and she's like so weighed down by this other stuff. And she's not like the empath that Dawn is necessarily. She didn't go into this because it's like some kind of calling. She's like, okay, I got to make
Mm-hmm.
money and I got to get trained in
Yeah.
something fast. So I'll do this. And that's real. That's real. There's nurses who are like, listen, I'm just here for the paycheck. And that's valid. But then, yeah, the end where they sort of try to show the doctor messy relationship. What was that even? Why was that happening? I could not understand like the reason or like what were they trying to say about that? I don't know. And then, yeah, the whole like I guess I don't know. The cruise thing was so weird because not only is that not a normal career trajectory, which is, I guess, fine. At no point did they give any clue that her true calling could be something more in the arts or something about singing or and dancing or anything. It's just like I have this friend and she's finally in town after sailing all over the world and now I'm going to do what she does or I don't know. It didn't make any sense. It didn't add like you said to the show and I was just sort of baffled as to like why are you here and why did they show so much? It's fine I guess that she was there and they showed some of that, but I would have preferred to see more of the other nurse, Jungran, instead of
Mm-hmm.
her. So I was like what are we doing? Yeah, so it's sort of strange to have
Yeah,
her.
because we don't really get to see a lot of anything from Jongran at all. Like we don't really get to see, and actually, there is even a commentary, like towards the very end, where she says something about the lines of, "Oh, she's talking to Dawoon, and she's saying, "Oh, you're doing this," and it's just like she feels like she's saying, "Oh, I feel stuck because both of you are chasing you." And Dawoon says to her, it's probably because you're the most level headed out of everyone. Like you're fairly stable. Like you don't need to change very much. But I wish we would have seen a bit more of her character just because I feel like she wasn't as developed. I feel like for most of it, she was just there so to
Well,
speak.
she was there, but it kind of in the opposite way. Of I was like, why are they so friendly with Dore since she's giving nothing on some level?
Hmm.
They had this sort of black backstory that Jongran trained with Dawn or went to nursing school with her, or somehow they knew each other beforehand, and so she was like happy to have her in this department now,
Hmm.
or something like that. Somehow they knew each other,
Hmm.
and she was really caring of Dawn, and they liked each other a lot, and they were close and all this stuff, and they had each other's backs, but it was not enough for me. I was like, why do you all have each other's backs so much? Or like, why are like, what is your deal? Like kind of what you were saying. Like, she does. They not acknowledge like, well, we did nothing with this character, almost nothing.
Hmm.
And but then
Hmm.
I was like, well, then why didn't you? Because it wouldn't not like take away some of the Dolore stuff and show like Jungran's like inner life a little more, or like what was motivating her, why like how and why did she come to nursing? And like, okay, fine, you're not struggling with anything specific maybe, but she's still like a youngish person, like, what are her hopes and dreams? Or did she fulfill them already? Like, I don't know. Like, what
Hmm.
about her relationship with the patients? It was something that left me feeling really lacking, with this drama.
Now, I agree. I agree. I think they missed the point with both Jongran and also like Yoon Monchon, like those two characters. I wish we would have seen a bit more. And I think actually thinking about it, I love that they sometimes jump to the doctors, but I don't necessarily need the story for the doctors at all. Like focus on the nurses, like that setup, like the day shift nurses, focus on them, like, and that's it. I think that's plenty. um but yeah, I don't think we necessarily need to get the doctors involved, and I'm glad they didn't. They didn't get the doctors too involved overall, which I was glad for. I don't think it's necessary, for the
Well,
story.
except for the zany proctologist, which was also bothering me. Why?
Right.
Why? Why proctology? Like, just why? Like, all of it was like so forced
It was
comedy.
bizarre. It was. It was especially like his whole like knuckle cracking and
Yeah.
the fact that he's like, oh, I don't do knuckle cracking as much when I'm around Dawood. I was like, that's just a bit odd.
Was that like his OCD thing or something? I think they were trying to say like he had a slight amount of maybe OCD type thing where he had this compulsive knuckle cracking habit. And why
Mm,
that was such a big deal, I don't know, because it's like there's a lot of other things that are could be like are compulsive behaviors that could be more troublesome for either the patient
hmm.
or people around them. But and then the connection between, well, I'm my knuckles and I'm also a proctologist, so I'm always sticking my fingers up people's backsides. Like it was just too much. It's just too much. And
Yeah.
I was like, we
Yeah.
need to let
Yeah.
this go. Like why? And
I
I did
agree.
like that he was a little quirky with his obsession with like
Hmm.
Mung being Duck or whatever was his
Hmm.
obsession.
Hmm.
But like, so his personality was pretty good, but the way they had him in this show for like no good reason, really, it was really throwing me off. And like the stuff they were trying to do with him, where there's like somewhat maybe comic relief, that's like the only thing I could really get from it, why he was there in that fashion, and not just a regular doctor she bumped into. That like they could have just done that, or he could have been anything else. He could have been an anesthesiologist, like any other thing. But
Any
why?
doctor.
Yeah, right, right.
It was a very odd choice for his career. I definitely agree. I also think that I don't know. He, like you said, the only thing that I can think of is that it was used a little bit for comedic relief because at the end of the day, the show is fairly heavy in tone in general, and it. I mean, it has to be for what they're handling. For the type of things that they're handling, I don't think it would be good for them to, have a comedic spin on it. So they kind of have to find a comedic relief elsewhere to like give little breathers to the show. But even saying that, I just think they could have still kept him comedic wise, but taken
Well, that's what I
away.
meant because they
This
had him
is
already a
odd.
little quirky, right? Because he was like, why would I eat a macaron, which is like a trendy
Yeah.
snack? I want to eat
Yeah.
this like old-fashioned traditional
Yeah.
Korean food
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
someone's mom literally made. Like that was like, they could have just stuck with like quirkiness or some other aspects of
Hmm.
his personality that wasn't so much heavy on the proctology aspect of it all. But I
No, I
wanted to
agree.
ask you what you thought about Yuchan and his like place in this world.
So I kind of understood where they were coming from with his character. It's the classic. you have your best friend that you've known for a very long time. And I think it was important to show, like, because obviously Yuchan and Dawoon have been almost like each other's support system for a very long time, even though they're not realizing it. I do appreciate the fact that Yuchan has been in love with her for God knows how long. And the theme of he keeps blaming timing. He keeps saying, oh, it's just not the right time to tell her. It's just not the right time to tell her. But I actually appreciated that. I feel like he, as a character, had a lot of growth throughout the 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 drama, to the point where by towards the later half, he says, actually, it's not timing. It's just me. I don't have the courage to admit to her that I like her. And I really appreciated that, because I think admitting that to yourself alone is a big step, and thinking, I either shoot my shot and tell her, or I let it go. And I feel like he chooses to let it go, and he chooses to kind of like focus on him as well. But he sees her as like his life jacket almost, a little bit, to deal with his panic disorder. I liked his character. I did. I actually liked his character more than I did like the actual love interest, and not necessarily for them to be in a relationship even. I just liked his character and his development overall. I think he had less screen time but more development.
I liked him a lot too, but I had really a lot of mixed feelings about his character and what all happened with him because um he was like she was like his anchor somehow,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
there's a lot of things they could do with his character where you could learn about her through him and how he sees her and her perspective of her. So there was like that. So he wasn't like completely, useless in quotes,
Mhm.
because he did serve a purpose and things like that. But I one thing I thought was interesting, he's sort of like a very lost person in some ways because he doesn't know how to handle his panic disorder. He just runs away from a lot of things. He's like, "Oh, I can't tell her. I
Mhm.
like whatever. It's bad timing. Bye." So he like,
Mhm.
doesn't do it.
Mhm.
And then same with his job. He's like, "I can't do this job because I have panic disorder." Okay, bye. So his like kind of tendency is to like run away from his problems to some extent. And like you said, they do show like he starts to face them and tries to grow into whatever. And his family's a little worried for him because they're like, "What is his problem?" But what I did like about it as someone who champions the unrequited love stories is that a lot of times with second lead stuff, you see that they end up with someone else. Maybe he would have ended up with one of the random nurses or that
Mhm.
Jongran who had
Mhm.
nothing else going
Mhm.
on in her life. Easily they could have been like, okay, you two get together. And they didn't do that. They didn't do that. So I
Mhm.
really appreciated that aspect of it. But I also did just have this lingering sense after the whole thing was over of like, what's up with him? Like, I don't know, somewhere, something about it was like, I need more of something. Either like, I mean, they did a lot for sure. Now that I'm mentioning it, all the stuff that did happen, but I was like, I want something. I don't know what I want from him and his character
Mm.
and this drama with him in it.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he needed. I don't know. Like I said, I liked his character. I do think, like I said, I feel like he and Dawoon, not even as a romantic relationship, like I mentioned, I just like them even as friends. They're
Yeah.
bickering and stuff. I'm a lover of bickering and banter and
Yeah.
things like that when it comes to relationships. So the fact that they had that as friends was really good to me. And like you said, he feels like she is his anchor, but I do feel like as the show goes on a little bit more, he learns to be his own anchor. I don't think his journey is complete, and I think he still has lingering feelings for her by the end of the show. So I feel like that might be what it is. I feel like his story feels incomplete in general.
Yeah. Right.
Mm. So yeah, but I liked his character. I really did. I think yeah.
Her
Um
dynamic is great. Like even his little
mm,
nickname, like Jungda or whatever.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
all that stuff was great. I liked it a lot too.
And do you know what? I don't think how realistic. Actually, I'm just thinking about one of the scenes that he was in later on in the show where he's starting to panic and he goes back to his office and he's like, "It's 6 o'clock. I'm leaving." And he's like, "Look, I signed a 40-hour contract. There is no rush work. I am leaving." And I'm like, I don't know if this, because like to me in the West, I mean, at least to me, the job that I work, my I'm very lucky. I have a very good boss. And I'm like, it's 5 o'clock. It's time to go home. Like 1 minute past 5, I'm out the door mostly. So I feel like to me, that's just a sensible thing. But I feel like a lot of the time when we watch Asian dramas, I don't know how true it is because obviously I don't live there. I haven't experienced the culture, but it's like they can't leave until their boss leaves and they can't. And it's
Right.
just like it feels so toxic in
I think
general.
it was like a way for them to show that he was setting a boundary and stop fretting. I think he lives a lot in fear. He's like so nervous,
Mhm.
energy, and fear of this and that and the other. I mean, even when this other guy shows up to sweep his girl, he's like, "Hey, go ahead." He's like almost like too
I'm done.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's too easily like gives it over. But I think they were trying to show like, okay, he's setting back, he's like being more assertive and things like that. It's not living in fear. I think what would have been helpful for that, like, A, I agree with you. That seemed really okay. Even if you're gonna do that, like, why announce it to the whole office and your boss and
Yeah.
everybody? But
Yeah.
B, if they had like done a build up of like how they did with Down, where like she learns to set boundaries and stop being such a people pleaser 100% of the time. If they had done a more slower build up, which maybe was originally written and cut out, who knows, with Yuchan, where he gets to a point where it's like, okay, I'm gradually arriving at this place where I could start to
Hmm.
like at least think
Hmm.
to myself, oh, it's 5. I'm just gonna quietly leave the office and not like turn my phone on. That's fine. That would have been fine, I think, to me. But the yeah, like you said, like just like suddenly abruptly being like, it's I signed a contract that's girl, stop talking. Like stop. Just leave.
Just
Just leave.
go. Just go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did feel a little abrupt. I'm proud of you that you set this boundary and that it's going to help you go into this world better in general because you're going to be able to deal with your panic disorder better. But I feel like that was a little, over the top almost. It was like it went from 0 to 100
I was
very
exactly going to
quickly.
say that. Exactly. Because even with the panic attack nurse or panic disorder nurse, male nurse who was
Hmm.
with them on the floor, like he found a coping mechanisms while at work. He's like, okay, this meeting or whatever is getting too heavy for me. I'm stepping out. I'm not going to explain too
Hmm.
much about it or do a lot of talking about it. I'm just going to go cope with it and like come back when I'm ready. That was something that Yuchan also could have done to a certain extent. Like, let me just like close all the chatting apps and my phone and everything for like half an hour and like take a walk, come back in or whatever, do whatever, or like go home and
Hmm.
like check everything remotely from my work phone or something. But yeah, the abruptness and the going from 0 to 100, 180, whatever, wherever he went was like, it was just really kind of unbelievable by that point after they had so carefully and meticulously developed all these other things. They just sort of
Hmm.
did that with him. And I was like, what just happened? Yeah.
Yeah. But even with that said, like I said, I really enjoyed his character. Um so yeah, I think I also enjoyed we just mentioned him, but the nurse with panic disorder. I just liked his character as well because I thought it was it's a small role. Like he's barely in it. He's in it for like an episode, but the fact that then he comes back to be the nurse there and I really liked him him as well. I don't know. I think I'm out of things to say. I think, like I said, the one thing I'll mention, I think we've touched on it already, but the cinematography in this is very, very nice. It's especially when they're showing you the disorders. I really liked it. There's one disorder where I think it's the very first case, and it's the one that you were saying, like it's a mother and a daughter, and she's rich, she's in her 40s, and she's just running like naked through the ward, and like to everybody else, it just looks like she's running naked through the ward. But then they kind of cut and they show you like what she's seeing, and I love when that like visual comparison happens because it truly shows both sides of the same coin in a sense because it shows like what we're seeing and then what they're seeing and it allows you to kind of empathize with these characters a bit more. I feel like they did really good job with that, like cinematography wise, I think.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Yeah, the cinematography was so lovely. And also, like, just we were talking very early on about it's okay to not be okay. And it just, when you, as you're describing the visual representation of the manifestation of her issues. It was like, and It's Okay to Not Be Okay. They didn't do, there was like the children's storytelling, not to talk about that show too much, but like there's like the children's
Mm-hmm.
story aspect where like some of the stuff was being told through children's stories. And then there was
Mm-hmm.
the aspect of just like talking your feelings out or having a person to like mirror, like you're going through a similar struggle. That was like one way to do it. And this is another way to do it. And both I thought did it really successfully. And I thought it was really good and interesting. And I wonder though, like, because like I said, I was in this like reading up on all the like self-help and mental health awareness stuff just because it was like so in vogue at the time. And I still read like tons of even self-help books I
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily feel I need to be reading. I'm reading them anyways. It's like just interesting to me. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder like for people who maybe had previously been a little more dismissive of like self-help modalities or treatment modalities or like, seeking help or therapy, like people do kind of some people like kind of are like that's like not really that helpful, or I don't think people, not everyone needs that, or whatever. I wonder if it's just a rhetorical question. If people found like things like the way It's Okay to Not Be Okay portrayed mental illness, and or the way that Jelly Dose of Sunshine portrayed it to be more effective or impactful. I mean, it would probably change based on what kind of person the viewer is.
You
And
ask.
yeah, yeah. So it's like interesting to me that because they did it in such different ways, and I think both are
Mm-hmm.
effective. But
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if anyone's mind was changed by watching either one of them.
Yeah. So for me personally, like I can answer that. For me personally, I'm very much a visual person. So to me, Daily Dose of Sunshine works really well because they're showing me things. I'm kind of I don't know, when it comes to a show, I'm a show me, don't tell me kind of person. And I really, really appreciated like them showing me. When I was very young, this was very many years ago, I had a doubt. Like, I had to go through a whole psychiatry thing. And I'm not like, I don't think, I don't know, when they are explaining things, it's not that great. But so that I think that's why this works out for me so well, this show in general, because they're showing me stuff. And I love when something shows me rather than tells me. But I think, like you said, it just depends on the person and like how their brain works in essence. Because like some people are like, they can read something and see it in their heads. Like I found this actually, this is a very different tangent, but I found this very interesting that some people, whenever they read a book, they just read a book. They don't see images in their heads. Whereas other people, they'll read a book and they'll like build images in their heads around it. So I think it just depends like which camp you sort of stand on, I think.
Yeah, because to again, I'm going to, even though I said we shouldn't talk about It's Okay Not Be Okay. I think
And
some
that's fine.
people, okay, good. I think it's some people are good at like attuning things, and the visual is like helpful for sure. I probably never not helpful. And I think some people like I'm a rabbit hole person. Like I will read a Wikipedia article on
Mm-hmm.
anything forever, and like I get really immersed in that. But what I liked about It's Okay Not Be Okay is like it's the lead characters. I forget everybody's name now, the characters' names, but the lead female character was so like, I'm broken. I'm a broken person. I can't be fixed. I can't da da da. And it's like she might have tried, I don't remember now, like traditional types of therapy or whatever she might have gone through, but she kind of didn't buy into it. Maybe because of
Mm-hmm.
how therapy sometimes does present these things, or a therapist talking to you and you're like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not me. But then she saw someone who was dealing with his own struggles, and she could finally start to like see value and getting herself at least better, if like you said, never
Mm-hmm.
to be cured, but like to at least try and like see things and become, try different coping mechanisms, whatever it is. So I think, yeah, it's like interesting because they showed it that way. But I agree because it was so impactful, especially how this show did it, because I think it could have been done more poorly. Like they would have maybe had the intention to show it the way this show did, but then the visual effects might have sucked or something, or the acting might not have been up to par. It might have come across as cartoonish or clowny
Mm-hmm.
or something,
Mm-hmm.
like, but they did a good job with both the way the actors acted it out and the way they chose to use maybe special effects, animation, whatever, to show it. I think they did an amazing job, and good for them for spending their budget that way.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And actually, funnily enough, they had the actor who plays Yuchan, they actually had him in water filming that scene, which I saw one of the behind the scenes, and they had him in water filming that. And I'm like, I think that adds so much to the scene itself because you really feel the panic through the screen, if that makes sense. So
Gosh,
I
it
think
is making
his
me
was
panic.
yeah, exactly. But even with when they're having a conference about panic disorders and stuff, and they're partnering people up and they're saying, right, cover their ears and now cover your nose and now try and breathe through a straw and like see how long you last. And that's what it feels like to like that's as close as they can show you to what it feels like to having a panic attack. And I was like, Mike, can you like even
No,
just that feels
no.
panicky to me?
Yeah. Yeah. It was very intense for sure. Those types of, I mean, but so effective because like I do think this show is trying maybe even more so than some other shows that surrounding mental health and mental illness. This show really tried to explain, like between the doctors' meetings where they're the staff meetings where they're presenting like a new illness
Mhm.
each day or whatever, or new I don't know, is illness even the right word for every one of them? Syndromes, whatever, conditions,
Disorder.
right, disorders, everything. They would present a new thing each topic each time to teach everyone about it and then do these little exercises. I mean, that's like above and beyond. I doubt, like, I don't work in any mental health facility, but I kind of
Mm.
doubt they're doing all that. But that's cool that they did it for the show and to try and help viewers really understand, empathize, at least get a sense what it is people are going through because so many people do suffer in silence, like Dawn was to the point where she didn't even know she was suffering. And they do present a good facade or a good enough one, or maybe they go home and crumple into a ball, we don't know, but like at work or wherever they have to be and look like a functioning human being, they can do it. And so people who don't have those experiences can't relate well or don't understand or maybe aren't so sympathetic and therefore pretty dismissive. So I did
Mhm.
appreciate if that was the efforts of the show was that was their goal was to make people understand and empathize a little bit more, which again, like, I mean, in my people who listen to my podcast, I do a lot of talking about mental health in Korea and the lack thereof of like
Yeah, the
the,
lack thereof, yes,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, right. Because there's still such a huge stigma, more so than many parts of the West, to seek out help because like your medical records can go on like your employee files or whatever. And so people are like, I'm not going to get hired if I get an official diagnosis of
Mm.
whatever, schizophrenia being a huge one. Schizophrenia in particular, there was some like high profile murders that happened, and the person who the people who did it had schizophrenia, and so there's a lot of playing down of like violence against women because it's like, oh well, that guy was schizophrenic, so like it wasn't his fault, and don't blame all men, and da, da, da. So there's so much there that
Yeah.
I like to like consider with like Korean audiences and Korean viewers and how Korean people are trying to tell these stories to the Korean, like this is not for us necessarily, right? Even if it's a Netflix show, it's for Korean viewers and for their
Mhm.
society to get a grasp on some of this or try to. So I find that really valuable for sure.
I agree. I think that even the fact that they chose to do a drama like this and bring it to the masses and go into these health conditions and dig so deep into them, actually, because they did go, you know, as deep as they could, I guess, in a show and try to show us and whatnot. I feel it shows it such a growth in general in the making of Korean dramas because I don't think 10 years ago we would have gotten a show like this necessarily. So I'm glad that a show like this happened because I hope it opens the door for more of them and for conversations to arise hopefully. I know a show can only do so much as a show can do, but I do feel like a show can demonstrate a lot of things and make people interested in topics and make them go research. At least for me, that's how it works. Like a show will show me something, a drama will show me something, and then I get interested and I go and do more research on it. So I hope that's like what this show kind of did in a sense.
We talked in the very beginning about adolescence, and as you yourself
Hmm.
was saying, though you haven't watched it yet, when you do, you'll understand more. But it was, or you haven't finished watching it. It's been so impactful and sparked so many discussions. So even if it moves the needle a little bit, it's definitely worthwhile. And the fact that there's so many high, or like at least a few high-profile actors in this, like Lee Jung-un, Park Bo-young, is adds
Hmm.
to the like legitimacy, for better or for worse, to a show like this. So yeah, it's I hope it like yeah, it's like you said, it's limited what a show can do, but they can do maybe something and like we're seeing that
Hmm.
in the way like adolescence impacting a lot of English speaking communities at least, and like it's even I saw a Korean ad for adolescence, so like a poster,
Really?
yeah, and it
Goodness.
said it's called whatever the word for adolescence in Korean. It's yeah, so it's like
Yeah.
getting a lot of buzz, so it can definitely do something, and that show is very topical. This show, I would at the time probably was topical in Korea,
Hmm.
just given they were having, well, they've been having so many issues with trying to prevent the loss of life through suicide and things like that. So
It's
yeah, I
such a
think
big thing over there. It's such a big thing. So, and it's something, I don't know, I think we're seeing more and more, especially in the newer generations. I would say that we're seeing more emphasis on mental health, and that's a good step in the right direction, I think. So yeah.
yeah, definitely.
I don't think I have anything else to say. Have you got any more thoughts at all, Mina?
No, I think it was definitely worth watching. And I
Hmm.
think I am gonna try and give it a rewatch at some point because, yeah, like even when they were having those little doctors' meetings and they were presenting something that I thought I already knew, like what that disorder was, I was like, wait, I need to pause in Wikipedia. Like I need to read
Yeah.
it again. So, I just found it really, if you have an interest in this, which I mean, you chose this for us to cover without necessarily even knowing that I had any interest in this, and I didn't
Yeah,
really.
no,
Yeah.
it's
So it works out really well. So if anyone has an interest in this subject matter, it's definitely worth watching for them. It's also just worthwhile to watch in general. And even though it's really heavy, it's still hopeful. So I think that's
hmm.
like my big takeaway from this one.
Actually, I think I'm glad you mentioned that because I think even though they're dealing with hard topics, the show itself overall offers a hopeful tone towards, just throughout. And I'm really glad that's how they chose to cover it overall. So, yeah. So, I think that's everything. Mina, where can people find you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram mainly, so you can find me there at Kpop Bookshelf. I have a podcast currently on hiatus. I called it Kpop Bookshelf, but it's really a lot more about Korean history, society, things like that, various topics I cover. And then I have some special episodes where I actually talk about K-pop itself for anyone who's a fan of that. But yeah, and you can also find me on many episodes with Jess's Daebak show, because I've been
Yeah,
a guest on for her a lot. We actually did a Mr. Sunshine episode, Liliana. So when you get a chance to watch it, you can go back and
I'll
listen
have
to
to
our.
go back. Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
definitely have to go back and re listen to that. Thank you so much for coming on and reviewing this drama with me. It's been a very good experience. I hope you enjoyed it. And that is it, guys. That is the episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, and we shall catch you next time. Bye.